So, reading from Ezra chapter 8, verse 15. I assembled them at the canal that flows towards Ahava, and we camped there 3 days. When I checked among the people and the priests, I found no Levites there. So I summoned Eleazar, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elnathan, Jarib, Elnathan, Nathan, Zechariah, and Meshullam, who were leaders, and Jorabib and Elnathan, who were men of learning. I sent them to Iddo, the leader, in Casiphah. I told them what to say to Iddo and his king's men, the temple servants in Casiphia, so that they may bring attendants to us for the house of our God. Because the gracious hand of our God was on us, they brought us Sherebiah, a capable man from the descendants of Malchiah, son of Levi, the son of Israel, and Sherebiah's sons and brothers, 18 men, and Hashabiah, together with Jeshiah, from the descendants of Moriah, his brothers and nephews, 20 men. They also brought 220 of the temple servants, a body that David and the officials had established to assist the Levites. All were registered by name. There, by the Havar canal, I proclaimed a fast, so that we might humble ourselves before our God and ask him for a safe journey for us and our children, with all our possessions. I was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to protect us from enemies on the road, because we told the king, the gracious hand of our God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and he answered our prayer. Then I set apart 12 of the leading priests, together with Sherebiah, Hazabiah, and 10 of their brothers, and I weighed out to them the offering of silver and gold, and the articles that the king, his advisers, his officials, and all Israel present there had donated for the house of our God. I weighed out to them 650 talents of silver articles weighing 100 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold, valued at 100 darics, and 2 fine articles of polished bronze as precious as gold. I said to them, you, as well as these articles, are consecrated to the Lord. The silver and gold are a freewill offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. Guard them carefully until you weigh them out in the chambers of the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, before the leading priests and the Levites and the family heads of Israel. Then the priests and Levites received the silver and gold and sacred articles that had been weighed out to be taken to the house of our God in Jerusalem. On the 12th day of the first month we set out from the Havar canal to go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was on us, and he protected us from our enemies and bandits along the way. So we arrived in Jerusalem, where we rested 3 days. On the 4th day in the house of our God we weighed out the silver and gold and the sacred articles into the hands of Meremoth, son of Uriah, the priest. Eleazar, son of Phinehas, was with him, and so were the Levites, Jozabad, son of Jehuah, and Nebadiah, son of Tinuai. Everything was accounted for by number and weight. The entire weight was recorded at that time. Then the exiles who'd returned from captivity sacrificed burnt offerings to the God of Israel, 12 bulls for all Israel, 96 rams, 77 male lambs, and, as a sin offering, 12 male goats. All this was a burnt offering to the Lord. They also delivered the king's orders to the royal satraps and to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, who then gave assistance to the people and to the house of God. Right, slap bang in the middle of the text we read something amazing. Verse 24. Then I set apart 12 of the leading priests, namely Sherebiah, Hazabiah, and 10 of their brothers. And I weighed out to them the offering of silver and gold and the articles that the king, his advisers, his officials, and all Israel present there had donated for the house of our God. I weighed out to them 650 talents of silver, silver articles weighing 100 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold valued at 1,000 denarii, and 2 fine articles of polished bronze as precious as gold. Wow, what a lot of valuable stuff to be given by the king. You need an armoured truck to transport it, or at least a military escort. And maybe that's what's behind the debate of verse 22. So verse 21 onwards, the people are about to set off. And what happens first? There's a fast and a prayer, and they ask God for protection. Ezra is about to set off to Jerusalem with the exiles with all their possessions. It's going to be a 900-mile journey. They're travelling through foreign lands with their children and all the gold and the silver that they've been entrusted with for the temple. In other words, they're easy pickings for robbers. Now, Ezra isn't silly. Ezra prays for God's hand. Look with me at verse 21. There by the Havar canal I proclaimed a fast so that we might humble ourselves before our God and ask him for a safe journey for us and our children with all our possessions. I was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to protect us from enemies on the road, because we told the king, the gracious hand of our God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and he answered our prayer. Ezra prays. He could have asked the king for an escort, but he feels he can't. Why? Because he told the king that God's hand provides for his people. Look again at what Ezra has told Artaxerxes in verse 22. The gracious hand of our God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger is against all who forsake him. So wow, Ezra prays. He shows his belief in God and confidence in God and puts it into practice. That's the difference between belief and trust. You see, anyone can believe in God, even the devil believes. But trust is putting that belief into practice. You see, prayer is the ultimate expression of our dependence on God. Or to put it the other way round, when we fail to pray, we're basically saying, I don't really depend on God. I can sort myself out, thanks. Prayer is turning away from ourselves to God in the confidence that he will provide what we need. And so to accept an escort from the king would be to show no confidence in the God that protects them. Prayer shows Ezra's helplessness, but also his confidence in God to protect them. Now, that prompts a question, doesn't it? Does it mean that we should reject human help like Ezra did? Now, it seems there are certain times when it's right to turn down human help like Ezra does. Not all the time, but there may be times when it's right to reject human help. Ezra had a choice. Rely upon God for protection or pursue an escort for protection. So how did he know his decision was faith and not folly? When we're faced with similar decisions, how do we know the difference? That's a good question to ask, is Am I acting in good sense or unbelief? For Ezra, his decision showed the king where his security really lay. It's not wrong to save money for the future. It's not wrong to have a career. It's good sense. But it's wrong to put our ultimate security in those sorts of things. And the principle behind this is to ask, what am I saying about God? Am I showing in my actions I am confident in him? Am I showing in my actions I am dependent on him? And practically, how do we do that? We give our money away to show we're not dependent on it. We use our time on things other than leisure and career to show there's something greater than the here and now. We pray. And we should expect people to say to us at times, I just don't get it. Because when they do, we can say with Ezra, let me tell you about the gracious hand of God that is on everyone who looks to him. God's hand provides for his people. And what Ezra is doing is showing confidence or trust in that. But then, what's the outcome? What happens? Well, verse 31, on the 12th day of the first month, we set out from the Havar Canal to go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was on us, and he protected us from enemies and bandits along the way. So we arrived in Jerusalem, where we rested 3 days. They made it. God indeed did protect them. Now, what about the precious metals they were given? Verses 33 and 34. On the 4th day in the house of our God we weighed out the silver and gold and the sacred articles into the hands of Meremoth, son of Uriah the priest. Eleazar, son of Phinehas, was with him, and so were the Levites, Jozabad, son of Jeshua, and Nebadiah, son of Binu. Everything was accounted for by number and weight, and the entire weight was recorded at that time. None of it was lost. You know, too often we look to our own strength, don't we, to keep us safe, rather than to rely on God. And we commit ourselves, perhaps, to him through prayer. But we will need to know in our heads and in our hearts that God's hand is upon us, that he will never leave or forsake us. No, you see, we can trust God. We can trust God with our lives. We can trust God with the lives of our families. We can trust God with our possessions. We can trust God with our careers. And in the process, we show the world our confidence in him. But what do the people do now? Well, look at verse 35. Then the exiles who returned from captivity sacrificed burnt offerings to the God of Israel, 12 bulls for all Israel, 96 rams, 77 male lambs, and, as a sin offering, 12 male goats. All this was a burnt offering to the Lord. They make a sin offering of 12 male goats. Sin is the offensive desire to be independent of the God that we're so utterly dependent upon. The Israelites had to offer sacrifices for their sin if God was to dwell amongst them. God's anger was turned away from the Israelites and onto the sacrifice. You see, Ezra's wisdom, his faith, were useless without God. And so Ezra acknowledges it was God who kept them safe. Do we? Are we so quick to say thank you to God for taking care of us? Or for those times when everything works out okay? Or rather, do we believe that it was down to our skill and our strategy? So Ezra prays. Ezra shows his complete belief in God and confidence in that God. And he puts it into practice. He follows through what he says, what he teaches by his actions in his life. And yes, it probably looked very foolish to everyone around. But he knew the gracious hand of God was upon him, and he put it into practice. So Ezra prays. He puts his faith into practice. And he turned to God and said, thank you. Do we?